Hey guys, today we're going to talk about Greco Roman Wrestling for MMA. Now, MMA is a sport in which athletes must have different skills in order to win in the steel cage. Although there are many styles of fighting that have influenced MMA over the years, there have been a handful that have really shown dominance over other martial arts in MMA. These martial arts are Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, Sambo, Judo, and wrestling. The modern MMA game has seen one of these martial arts dominate over all others, and that one is wrestling. Most modern MMA and UFC champs either come from a heavy wrestling background or have introduced heavy and intense wrestling training for MMA into the MMA training program. There are three main types of wrestling that fighters are practicing. The first two are freestyle wrestling and folk style wrestling, where you can use your whole body in order to throw, reverse, or pin the opponent by using their whole body in order to do so. The third style of wrestling, and the style in which we will cover in this video, is Greco Roman Wrestling. This style of wrestling differs from freestyle wrestling in the fact that you cannot touch the opponent anywhere below the hips, and at the same time, you're only allowed to use your upper body in order to throw, reverse, and pin the opponent. This means that you cannot grab an opponent's leg in a single leg takedown or use your foot to sweep and trip the opponent like you would be able to in freestyle wrestling. This places more emphasis on clinch work, upright stance, and hand fighting in Greco Roman wrestling than in freestyle and folk style wrestling. Now let's talk about Greco Roman wrestlers in MMA and the UFC. Now, wrestling has shown dominance in mainstream MMA and the UFC, where a majority of champions have come from wrestling. With second place in terms of martial arts being Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you have boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, Taekwondo, karate, etc. But a majority have come from wrestling. The numbers do not lie. Wrestling is king, and there's a good reason why, as wrestling gives a person the ability to control where the fight goes. It's a bridge between standing and the ground, as well as it develops an incredible mental fortitude that is hard to find in other combat arts. Out of all the wrestlers that have been UFC champions, there have been a large number of wrestlers coming from a Greco Roman wrestling background, most notably Randy Couture and John Jones. Both of these champions were notorious for their clinch game, dirty boxing from the clinch, domination on the cage, and takedowns. They were incredibly hard to take down for opponents that were grapplers, while being able to strike down strikers at ease in order to finish them off the ground. Okay? Uh, Now let's talk, why is Greco-Roman so effective in MMA? Okay, there are many factors to why Greco-Roman wrestling does so well in MMA, such as fitness, technique, and mental toughness. MMA's current point scoring system and the physical cage itself benefits Greco-Roman wrestling. All of these lead to this type of wrestling really having an advantage in the sport of MMA and and helps answer why wrestling is a must for MMA. Now, then we have Greco-Roman fitness in regards to MMA. Greco-Roman matches are tough. They are non-stop, and Greco-Roman wrestling training develops many different attributes that carry into the UFC octagons, such as strength, speed, flexibility, tactile sensitivity, and stamina. The non-stop nature of the sport of Greco-Roman wrestling develops a rhythm and attacks that is very similar to an MMA match. There's a lot of pushing, pulling, gripping, and lifting in a wrestling match, just as there is in an MMA match. The main difference is the cage, the allowance of striking and submissions. Okay? A very common method of strength training in Greco-Roman wrestling is simply lifting your training partner off the ground multiple times each practice. This includes carrying them while running, throwing them, and lifting them off the ground in an explosive manner. On top of this, constant clinch fighting and trying to push the opponent out of bounds develops great core strength, grip, and balance. This type of training is 100% functional in manner and has a direct relation to the type of training needed for MMA. Now, there's also Greco-Roman technique in MMA. This is, there is a technical advantage that Greco-Roman wrestling has in regards to MMA over other styles of wrestling. And that is the fact that the stance in Greco-Roman wrestling is much more upright and high in comparison to the stance in freestyle wrestling. Now, this is due to the fact because there are leg tacks in freestyle wrestling, Athletes will keep a lower stance in order to better defend against grabbing the leg, single leg takedowns, double leg takedowns, and various other leg attacks that are common in freestyle wrestling. Greco Roman wrestling's high stance enables a better transition to proper striking stance, which generally is higher, as to enable faster body movement and better footwork when speaking about striking. There are also a number of grips from the clinch that enable a Greco-Roman wrestler to attain superior body position in order to take down, push out, or throw the opponent. This mastery of the clinch, when combined with boxing, leads to what is called dirty boxing, which simply is striking an opponent from close quarters in the clinch while hindering the opponent's ability to move and strike back. Upper body throws and takedowns are another facet that Greco-Roman wrestling brings into the MMA game plan. The benefit of upper body throws and takedowns is that they can be done very quickly from from the MMA fighting stance and the MMA clinch without risking the fighter's fighting stance, and thus being more susceptible to knee attacks and chokes such as the guillotine. Should a fighter not be able to successfully take the opponent down, then the fighter will still be in a proper upright position, ready to either throw again or strike the opponent with ease. The best part of Greco-Roman takedowns is that they have a strict emphasis on landing on top of your opponent. This is great as you immediately are in a top position on the ground and will be in the superior position to ground and pound the opponent or go for the submission should you choose to. Okay, now Greco-Roman wrestling versus the Muay Thai clinch. The clinch is an extremely important part of the MMA game, and there are two types of clinch that can be seen in modern MMA. The first is the Muay Thai clinch, which is excellent for delivering devastating knees and elbows, as well as has a few takedowns that can be seen from this clinch. The Muay Thai clinch emphasizes control of the head in what is called the Muay Thai plum. Here they can move the head and strike while in control of the head, thus being able to control the spine. This type of clinch prioritizes striking above anything else. Now, the second is the Greco clinch, where the main focus is about control and the ability to throw, push, or take the back of the opponent standing in front of you. The Greco-Roman wrestling clinch for MMA evolved when the element of striking was added into the picture, thus creating the perfect environment for dirty boxing. This type of clinch has the benefit of controlling where the fight ends up, as well as it's very good to learn for defending a takedown. The first UFC fighter to really use the Greco clinch to his advantage was Randy Couture, who used it in completely dominant fashion to dominate the competition. As wherever the opponent went in the clinch, Randy was in full control and striking them hard. Okay. Now, another factor is Greco-Roman wrestling's mental fortitude for MMA. MMA is a very mental sport, as you need to be ready to grind through the tough times when in a fight. Wrestling is the best way to get mentally strong, as there's no room for weakness in any type of wrestling, regardless of it's in a wrestling match or even a typical wrestling practice. You are going to have to grind it through day by day, minute by minute, and session by session, all of which produces a level of mental fortitude unseen in other combat sports and martial arts. Now, you place this mental strength in an MMA ring, and you have the mentality of a champion, one that pushes through adversity, is unafraid of any challenge, and keeps on moving forward during tough times. Wrestlers are used to the pressure of competition since they're young. They've competed in thousands of wrestling matches, and this leads to them not being fazed by pre-fight mental anxiety, as they've been there so many times. It's just another day in the job, in their eyes. The end product is that wrestlers will always come to win, give 100%, and leave everything on the mat, or in this example, the cage. This can be seen by amazing performances we see by wrestlers in top-level MMA organizations such as the UFC and Bellator. And this goes for all wrestlers, not just Greco, but also Greco-Roman, freestyle wrestling, folk style, etc. They just have the attitude of a winner. Now, Greco-Roman wrestling and the MMA point system. Different MMA organizations have different rules and point scoring systems. The UFC will be different to Bellator and one FC. Each MMA organization has its way of scoring fights. Modern MMA organizations do have a few common viewpoints on point scoring that happen to fall in the favor of wrestlers, okay? All MMA organizations give favor to a fighter who shows dominance in a fight. This means that should a fighter knock down another fighter, should they throw or take down the opponent, or end up in top position on the ground, this will translate to the fighter showing dominance over the opponent. Now, this heavily plays in a Greco-Roman wrestler's favor, as they have the ability to throw opponents. They have the ability to land on top position a large percentage of the time. And they have ability to dominate the clinch and push the opponent against the fence, all of which show dominance. Now, let's talk about the disadvantages of Greco-Roman wrestling in MMA, okay? Because there are a few disadvantages that Greco-Roman wrestling brings into MMA, such as the fact that they do not learn any leg attacks, such as a single leg takedown and double leg takedown, as well as they do not know how to defend the attacks as well as a freestyle or folk style wrestler would in terms of single leg and double leg. Now, another disadvantage is the fact that Greco-Roman wrestling scrambling does not address what to do if there's a grip or hold on the leg, regardless if it is on their leg or the opponent's leg. Last but not least is the fact that, like all styles of wrestling, there is no knowledge of submissions and how to fight off their back in the guard position, which is a very big strength of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as we know. That said, all of the weaknesses stated above can easily be fixed, and generally speaking, Greco-Roman wrestlers are usually some of the quickest learners of new arts due to the amazing level of athletic prowess, coordination, and total attributes developed by years of Greco wrestling training and competition. Now, in conclusion, mixed martial arts is a very complex and dynamic sport. It's exciting to watch and always full of surprises. Through the evolution of MMA, from the early days of Vale Tudo in Brazil to the earliest UFC events, we have seen a constant progression in MMA with new styles, new athletes from different countries, and new training methods combining together to develop new MMA fighting styles, tactics, and strategies. We have seen the early days of BJJ's dominance in MMA to freestyle wrestling's dominance, then to the lay and pray dominance of kickboxing, and the clinch domination of Greco-Roman wrestling in the latter years. The question is not if Greco-Roman wrestling is the best single art for MMA, but how to train and add Greco-Roman wrestling into one's MMA training regime in order to give them the best chance of winning in the MMA cage, as those who do add Greco into their training will for sure have a competitive edge over a fighter who doesn't have any Greco-Roman wrestling training at all. I hope you like this, and have a great day from Grapplezilla.